I graduated with honors and a spotless record, yet I cannot land a single entry-level job in this town. My parents made sure of that. They did not just badmouth me. They told every hiring manager I steal. They think starving me out will force me home, but they forgot about my grandmother. She predicted their betrayal years ago and left me the one thing they fear most, the receipts to burn their perfect reputation to the ground. My name is Shiloh Patterson. I am 28 years old, and on paper, I am the kind of candidate recruiters are supposed to fight over. I graduated with honors from the state university. I have a 4.0 grade point average. I passed my certification exams on the first try. I am organized, I am punctual, and I am desperate. For the last 2 years, I have not been able to land a job that pays more than minimum wage. It does not make sense. At least, it did not make sense to me for the first 6 months. I live in a mid-sized town where everyone knows everyone, but the economy is decent. There are banks, logistics firms, and corporate headquarters for regional retailers. I applied to all of them. I tailored my resume. I wore the navy blue blazer that I bought with the last of my savings. I practiced my handshake until it was firm but not aggressive. I remember an interview I had 3 months ago with a mid-sized logistics firm. The hiring manager was a man named David. He was jovial, the kind of guy who leans back in his chair and laughs at his own jokes. We clicked immediately. We spent 20 minutes talking about forensic accounting and the specific software systems his company used. I knew the systems inside and out. I saw the look in his eyes, that specific glint of relief a manager gets when they realize they have found the person who is going to make their life easier. He told me I was exactly what they were looking for. He told me the starting salary, which was $55,000 a year. It was not a fortune, but to me, it sounded like a lifeline. He shook my hand at the door and said he just needed to run the standard background check and make a few courtesy calls to my references. He said he would call me by Friday. Friday came and went, then Monday. When I called him on Tuesday, his assistant told me he was in a meeting. When I called on Wednesday, she told me the position had been filled. Her voice was different. It was tight, embarrassed. It was the voice of someone who had been told to lie to a nice person. That was the pattern. It happened with the bank downtown. It happened with the insurance agency near the highway. It happened with the small tax preparation office that sits above the bakery on Main Street. The doors would open wide, welcoming and warm, and then, invariably, they would slam shut with a silence so absolute it felt violent. I started to get paranoid. I checked my credit report to see if someone had stolen my identity. I checked my social media to see if there were photos of me doing something I did not remember doing. Everything was clean. I was clean. I was a ghost haunting my own life, invisible to the professional world, but painfully visible to the people who watched me fail. Those people were my parents. My parents are the pillars of this community. My father, Richard Patterson, runs the Stonewick Development Group. If you drive through our county, you will see his signs on half the commercial construction sites. He builds the strip malls where we shop and the office parks where I cannot get hired. He is a deacon at the First Church. He sits on the board of the local hospital. He is a man who shakes hands firmly and looks you in the eye and tells you he is a man of his word. My mother, Catherine, is the perfect counterpart. She is the woman who organizes the charity galas. She is the one who remembers everyone's birthday and sends handwritten notes on heavy, cream-colored cardstock. She is elegant, poised, and terrifyingly polite in our town. An invitation to my parents' house for the annual summer barbecue is not just a social event. It is a summons. It is confirmation that you matter. They are beloved. They are respected. And they are the reason I'm starving. I did not learn the truth from them. Of course, my parents do not have honest conversations. They have strategy sessions disguised as family dinners. No, I learned the truth from a woman named Sarah, a human resources director at a regional credit union who finally broke the rules because her conscience was heavier than her fear. I had interviewed with her 2 weeks prior. It had gone perfectly. Then, the silence. But one afternoon, I ran into her at the grocery store. I was buying ramen noodles and generic peanut butter. She saw my basket. She looked at me. really looked at me, and I saw her face crumble. She pulled me into the aisle with the laundry detergent, glancing over her shoulder to make sure no one was listening. She told me that she had called my previous employer for a reference. Technically, I had never been employed by my father, but I had done freelance bookkeeping for his company during college to build my resume. It was the only industry experience I had. She told me that my father had taken the call personally. He did not say, "Shiloh is lazy." He did not say, "Shiloh is unqualified." Those things can be debated. Those things can be overcome with a trial period. No, he told her something much worse. He told her, with the heavy, sorrowful voice of a heartbroken father, that I had a problem with theft. He told her I had embezzled funds. He told her I had a compulsion. He said they were handling it privately as a family matter, and that they loved me dearly, but he could not in good conscience let another business owner take that risk. He said he was protecting her. I remember standing in that grocery store aisle, the smell of lavender detergent thick in the air, feeling the blood drain out of my legs. It was so elegant. It was so simple. It was a lie that destroyed me completely while making him look like a saint. Who would question Richard Patterson? Who would doubt the word of a man who donated $10,000 to the Police Benevolent Fund every Christmas? If he said his own daughter was a thief, then she was a thief. It was tragic. The town would whisper. It was so sad that the Pattersons had to deal with such a troubled child. That was the narrative. I was the troubled one. I was the liability. My brother, Austin, was the asset. Austin is 2 years older than me. He is the golden child, the crown prince of the Patterson dynasty. He works alongside my father at Stonewick. He drives a silver sedan that costs more than I have earned in my entire life. He has the same polished smile as my mother and the same shark-like instinct as my father. He can do no wrong. If Austin crashed a car, my father would buy the dealership. If Austin failed a class, the professor was incompetent. I was different. I was the one who asked questions. I was the one who wanted to know why the numbers in the ledger did not add up. I was the one who didn't care about the country club membership or the right kind of shoes. Growing up in that house was like living in a museum. You could look, but you could not touch. You had to be quiet. You had to be grateful. Affection was a currency, and it was distributed based on performance. If you looked good in the family Christmas photo, you were loved. If you agreed with father's political rants at the dinner table, you were smart. If you tried to be your own person, you were difficult. I had been difficult for a long time. After the encounter with Sarah in the grocery store, I drove to my parents' house. It is a sprawling brick estate on the hill, overlooking the town like a feudal castle. I walked into the kitchen, shaking with rage. My mother was arranging hydrangeas in a crystal vase. My father was reading a report on his tablet. I confronted them. I screamed. I told them I knew what they were doing. My father did not yell back. He did not get angry. He just took a sip of his iced tea and looked at me with a calm, terrifying pity. He told me I was hysterical. He told me that the world was a hard place and I was obviously struggling to cope. He said that if I was having trouble finding work, it was probably because I just wasn't interviewing well. He denied making the calls. He denied everything, but his eyes were smiling. Then he made the offer, the same offer he had been making for 2 years. He said I should move back home. He said there was a place for me at the front desk of his office. I could answer phones. I could greet clients. I could be safe, under his roof. Where he could keep an eye on me, that was the game. They did not want to destroy me forever. They just wanted to break my legs so I couldn't walk away. They wanted me crawling back, dependent, submissive, and grateful for the scraps they threw me. They wanted to neutralize me. They wanted to make sure I never became someone who could stand on her own. Someone who could perhaps look too closely at their own lives. Why? Why would parents do this to their own daughter? For a long time, I thought it was just cruelty. I thought they just hated that I was different. But now, I suspect it is fear. I have always been good with numbers. I have always been good at seeing patterns. And I think, deep down, my father knows that if I ever got free, If I ever got powerful enough to stand at eye level with him, I would see things he does not want anyone to see. They think they have won. They look at me, working night shifts at a roadside motel, because it is the only place that pays cash and doesn't check references. And they see a broken girl. They see a victory. They are waiting for the day I knock on their heavy oak door and beg to come home. But they forgot about Grandma Evelyn. My grandmother was my father's mother, but she was nothing like him. She was sharp, funny, and relentlessly honest. She was a woman who built her own wealth before she married. A woman who knew exactly who her son was. She died 4 years ago. My parents threw a lavish funeral, weeping into silk handkerchiefs, playing the role of the grieving family perfectly, but I knew the truth. They were relieved she was gone. She was the only person my father couldn't bully. She was the only person my mother couldn't manipulate. Grandma Evelyn saw everything. She saw how they treated me. She saw how they pruned me like a bonsai tree, cutting off every branch that tried to grow too high. The last time I saw her, she was in the hospice wing at the hospital. She was frail, her skin like paper, but her eyes were bright blue fire. She grabbed my wrist with a grip that was surprisingly strong. She pulled me close and whispered something I have replayed in my head 1,000 times since the rejection letters started piling up. She said, "They are going to try to keep you small. Shiloh, they are going to try to box you in. They love control more than they love the truth." I had nodded, crying, telling her I would be okay. She shook her head. "No, you will not be okay. Not at first. They will corner you. But listen to me. When they corner you, you will have a door." I did not know what she meant then. I thought she meant spiritual strength. I thought she meant memories. I was wrong. Grandma Evelyn was not a sentimental woman. She was a strategist. Yesterday, I received a letter. It was not delivered to my apartment, where my parents might have intercepted it. It was delivered to a private post office box I didn't know existed, the key to which was taped to the bottom of her old recipe box that she insisted I keep. Inside the box was an envelope, and inside the envelope was a letter from a law firm in the city. 3 hours away. The letter was brief. It stated that a specific condition of a trust had been met. It stated that I was required to appear at the headquarters of Crown Gate Financial Holdings tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Crown Gate Financial is not just a company, it is a titan. It is the kind of firm that eats companies like Stonewick Development for breakfast. It is run by a CEO named Marcus Thorne, a man known for being ruthless, brilliant, and untouchable. The letter said that Mr. Thorne was expecting me. I have never met Marcus Thorne. I have no idea why a man who controls billions of dollars would want to speak to a disgraced accountant working the night shift at a motel. My hands were shaking as I held the paper. My parents think they have cut off every escape route. They think they have burned every bridge I could possibly cross. They think I am alone in a dark room with no windows. But Grandma Evelyn built a door. She built it years ago, brick by brick, inside the walls of their perfect kingdom. Tomorrow, I'm going to walk through it. I checked my bank account balance this morning. I have $42.18. It is just enough for a bus ticket to the city and a cup of coffee. I packed my bag. I put on my navy blue blazer, the one that has seen so many rejections. I looked in the mirror. I look tired. I look pale. But for the first time in 2 years, I do not look like a victim. My parents told the world I was a thief. They wanted to destroy my reputation to keep me under their thumb. They wanted a war of attrition. They are about to get a war. All right, but it is not the one they planned for. I am Shiloh Patterson. I am the daughter they tried to bury. They just forgot that I am also the granddaughter of the woman who owned the shovel. And tomorrow, I start digging. The bus ride to the city is long, giving me hours to watch the landscape shift from the manicured lawns of my hometown to the industrial gray of the highway. It is a transition I have wanted to make for a decade. Sitting here, with my forehead pressed against the cool glass, I do not just see the passing trees. I see the ghosts of the girl I used to be, trapped in a house that everyone else envied, to understand why my parents would destroy my career. You have to understand the house I grew up in. It was not a home. It was a stage set. It was a sprawling colonial revival with white pillars and perfectly trimmed boxwood hedges. Inside, the air always smelled of lemon polish and expensive potpourri. There was never a shoe out of place, never a coat thrown over a chair, and never a voice raised in genuine passion. We were the Pattersons. We were an institution. My childhood was defined by what my mother called optics. To her, life was a series of photographs that would be judged by the community. If we looked happy, we were happy. If we looked successful, we were successful. The reality of our feelings was irrelevant. It was a childhood of rehearsed smiles and stiff collars. I learned very early that affection in our house was not a birthright. It was a transaction. It was payment for good behavior, and good behavior meant remaining quiet, looking pretty, and agreeing with my father. My father, Richard, was the sun around which our terrified little planets orbited. As the head of Stonewick Development Group, he was used to people bending to his will. He did not leave that authority at the office door. At home, he ruled with a terrifying, calm benevolence. He rarely yelled. He did not have to. A raised eyebrow or a disappointed sigh from him was enough to make the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. He managed his family the way he managed a construction site. Everyone had a role. Everyone had a function. My mother's function was public relations. She was the softer face of his ambition. She curated our lives. She hosted the charity auctions where the town's elite drank white wine and congratulated themselves on their generosity. She sat on the library board. She organized the church flower rotations. She was a master of social control through politeness. If someone in town acted out of line, my mother did not confront them. She simply froze them out with a smile so brittle it could cut glass. She taught me that manners were not about kindness. They were about superiority. Being polite was how you showed people that you were better than them. Then there was Austin. My brother was the heir apparent. From the moment he could walk, he was treated as the future king of the county. It did not matter that Austin was average in every way. He was charming, certainly, but he had no drive, no curiosity, and very little discipline. It did not matter, in my father's eyes. Austin was a younger version of himself, and therefore, Austin was perfect. I remember one dinner when I was 16. I had just come home with my report card. I had a 4.0 average and had been named the editor of the school paper. I was bursting with pride, waiting for the right moment to share the news. We were eating roast chicken. The only sound was the scraping of silver forks against fine china. My father looked at Austin. Austin had barely passed his history exam and had recently been caught speeding on the main highway. My father wiped his mouth with a linen napkin and smiled. He told Austin that he had heard good things about his football practice. He told Austin that he had a natural leadership style on the field. He spoke for 10 minutes about how proud he was of Austin's potential. Austin just shrugged and ate his potatoes, accepting the praise as if it were the weather. Something inevitable, when there was finally a lull. I spoke up. I told them about my grades. I told them about the editorship. My mother smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. She told me that was nice, but I should be careful not to seem too bookish. She said boys did not like girls who were too opinionated. My father did not even look up from his plate. He simply said that anyone could get good grades if they studied enough, but leadership was a gift you were born with. That was the dynamic. Austin's mediocrity was celebrated as potential. My excellence was tolerated as a cute hobby. I was the girl. My role was to marry well, stay close to home, and perhaps run a charity committee like my mother. My achievements were not viewed as assets. They were viewed as threats. If I was too smart, I might realize that the kingdom was hollow. The rule in our house was simple. Disagreement equaled disloyalty. Independence equaled disrespect. You did not have your own opinion. You had the family opinion. If you deviated, you were not just wrong, you were betraying the unit. I felt the first true cut of this betrayal when I was 21. I was finishing my junior year of college. I had applied for a prestigious summer internship with a forensic accounting firm in Chicago. It was highly competitive. Thousands of students applied, and they only took 12. When I got the acceptance letter, I felt like I could fly. It was my ticket out. It was proof that I was good at this, that I could stand on my own in a major city without my father's name opening the door. I brought the letter home on a weekend visit. I laid it on the mahogany desk in my father's study. I expected him to be skeptical, but I thought the prestige of the firm would sway him. He loved prestige. He read the letter, then he laughed. It was a short, dry chuckle. He tossed the paper back onto the desk as if it were a piece of junk mail. He asked me why I would want to go to Chicago. He asked me if I thought I was too good for this town. He told me that girls did not need to be chasing careers in dirty cities. He said it was dangerous. He said it was unnecessary. I tried to argue. I told him it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I told him it would set me up for a career anywhere in the country. His face went cold. The amusement vanished. He told me that I had a responsibility to the family. He said he had already arranged for me to spend the summer helping in the file room at Stonewick. He said I would be close to home, where I belonged. He said if I went to Chicago, I would be going without a penny of support. I did not go. I was 21, but I was financially tethered to them. They paid my tuition. They paid for my car. They paid for my apartment near campus. I realized then that the money was not support. It was a leash. Every dollar they gave me was a thread in a web designed to keep me stuck. They did not pay for things because they wanted me to succeed. They paid for things so they could threaten to take them away. I spent that summer in the file room at Stonewick, watching my brother come in at 10 in the morning and leave at 2 for golf, while I organized invoices for $12 an hour. I died a little bit that summer. I realized that to them, I was not a person with dreams. I was a possession. The only person who saw me, truly saw me, was Grandma Evelyn. She lived in a guest cottage on the edge of the property. Though cottage is an understatement, it was a beautiful stone house that she had built with her own money decades ago. Evelyn Rowe was a force of nature. She had taken over her husband's small hardware business when he died young and turned it into a regional supply chain before selling it for millions. She was the source of the family wealth, a fact my father hated to acknowledge. She was in her late 70s then, sharp-eyed and brisk. She did not bake cookies. She drank bourbon neat and read financial newspapers. My parents tolerated her because they wanted her inheritance, but they were terrified of her tongue. She cut through their optics like a hot knife. One humid afternoon in July of that terrible summer, I was sitting on her porch, staring at the ground, miserable. I had just been scolded by my mother for wearing slacks that were too businesslike for a family barbecue. Grandma Evelyn came out with 2 glasses of iced tea. She sat down in the wicker chair next to me. She did not offer me a platitude. She did not tell me to cheer up. She took a sip of her tea and looked toward the main house, where my father was holding court on the patio. She told me that I was smarter than all of them. She said it as a simple fact, not a compliment. She told me that my brother had the depth of a puddle and my father had the ego of a dictator. I looked at her, startled. We never spoke like that about them. It was forbidden. She turned those piercing blue eyes on me. She told me that I was confusing their control for love. She said that most parents want their children to fly, to be better than them, but not my parents. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a rasp that sounded like gravel crunching under tires. She said, "Your parents are small people, Shiloh. They have built a big life to hide how small they are, and you are big, you are capable, and that terrifies them." I asked her why they couldn't just be happy for me. She shook her head. She said, "Because if you succeed without them, it proves they aren't necessary. If you make it on your own, you expose the lie. You expose that they didn't make you who you are." She took my hand. Her skin was thin, but her grip was iron. She said, "They love control more than they love truth. Remember that. They will burn down the whole world to keep you in your place because your independence feels like an insult to them." I thought she was being dramatic. I thought she was just an old woman with a grudge against her son. I did not understand how literal she was being. I did not understand that she was giving me a warning. She saw the chessboard. She saw the moves they were making before I even knew we were playing a game. She knew that eventually I would try to leave for good, and she knew that when I did, they would not just let me walk away, they would try to cripple me. That conversation planted a seed in my chest. It was a cold, hard seed of realization. I stopped seeking their approval that day. I stopped bringing home my A-plus papers with a hopeful smile. I stopped trying to explain my ambitions to my mother while she arranged flowers. I went quiet. I started saving every cent I could from my allowance and my small wages. I started studying harder, not for them, but for my resume. I started building a fortress inside my mind where they could not reach, but I underestimated them. I thought if I just got my degree, got a job, and moved out, I would be free. I thought legal adulthood was the finish line. I did not realize that for people like Richard and Catherine Patterson, there is no finish line. There is only possession or destruction. Grandma Evelyn knew. That is why she started moving pieces on the board that I couldn't see. While I was crying over a lost internship, she was calling lawyers. While I was feeling helpless, she was building a weapon. As the bus pulls into the city terminal, hissing its brakes, I think about the look on my father's face the last time I saw him. It was the same look he had given me when I asked for the internship. Dismissive, arrogant. Certain that I had nowhere else to go. He was wrong. Grandma Evelyn was right. They loved control more than truth. But they are about to learn that the truth is a patient hunter. And I am done being the prey. To understand the blacklist, you have to understand the theft. Or rather, the theft. This is the weapon my father used to slit the throat of my reputation. It wasn't a grand heist. It wasn't a midnight raid on the company safe. It was $3,450 charged to a corporate American Express card. Every cent of it authorized, documented, and justified. It happened during my final semester of college. I was preparing for the Certified Public Accountant exams, a grueling series of tests that require months of study and expensive prep courses. I had also applied for several specialized certifications in forensic auditing. The costs were adding up: study materials, registration fees, background check processing, software licenses. I was stressing about money, picking up extra shifts at the campus library. When my father called me into his study one weekend, he was in a good mood. He had just closed a deal on a new shopping center. He handed me a silver Stonewick Development corporate card. He told me to use it. He said he wanted me to focus on passing my exams, not worrying about nickels and dimes. He was specific. He said, "Cover your exam fees, your books, whatever professional requirements you have. Consider it an investment in the family business." I hesitated. I knew his gifts always came with strings, but I was exhausted, and the offer seemed pragmatic. I took the card. I was meticulous. I am an accountant. After all, I didn't buy clothes. I didn't buy dinner. I didn't buy gas. I used that card strictly for the purpose he stated. I paid for the Becker review course. I paid the registration fees for all 4 sections of the exam. I paid for the ethics exam fee and the licensing application. I kept every receipt. I created a spreadsheet tracking every transaction, coding them by category, attaching digital copies of the invoices. I came in under the budget I had mentally set for myself. I thought I was being responsible. I thought I was showing him that I treated his money with respect. Then the statement arrived. I was home for a weekend visit when the storm broke. I walked into the kitchen to find the bill laid out on the granite island like a crime scene photo. My father was standing over it, his face a mask of disappointment that was far more terrifying than anger. He asked me what I thought I was doing. I was confused. I told him I did exactly what he said. I pulled out my laptop. I offered to show him the spreadsheet. I offered to show him the receipts that matched every line item on the statement. He didn't look at my laptop. He looked at me. He told me that he had offered to help with a few books, not to bankroll a shopping spree. He pointed at the charge for the review course, $2,000, and asked if I thought money grew on trees. He pointed at the exam fees and asked why I needed to take all of them at once. He reframed everything. The permission he had given me in the study was gone, replaced by a new reality where I had taken advantage of his generosity. He twisted the narrative in real time. "You think the rules don't apply to you, Shiloh," he said, his voice low and heavy. "You think because you're my daughter, you can just swipe a card and not think about the cost? This is embezzlement, Shiloh. In the real world, people go to jail for this." I felt the room spin. I tried to argue. I reminded him of his exact words. "You said cover professional requirements. That is what this is." He shook his head, looking at my mother, who was standing by the sink, wringing her hands. "See," he said to her, "no remorse. She steals from us and then argues about definitions." My mother looked at me with pleading eyes. She didn't defend me. She never defended me. She just wanted the tension to stop. "Shiloh, honey," she said softly, "just apologize to your father. You surely misunderstood him. Just say you're sorry so we can move on." That was the lesson. That was the family survival skill I had been taught since birth. Submit first. Clarify later. Truth didn't matter. Peace mattered. The patriarch's ego mattered. I stood there, my face burning with humiliation and injustice. I knew I hadn't stolen anything. I knew I had followed his instructions to the letter. But I also knew that in this house, I was already guilty because he said I was. So I did the only thing I could do to retain a shred of dignity. I opened my banking app on my phone. I transferred every dollar I had saved, my emergency fund, my rent money for the next 2 months, the money from the library job, and I wired the full amount to his personal account, $3,450. I showed him the transfer confirmation screen. My hands were shaking. "I don't want your money," I said, my voice trembling. "I paid it back, every cent. We're even." He didn't look at the phone. He just sighed, as if my repayment was another act of defiance. "It's not about the money, Shiloh. It's about the breach of trust. You can't put a price on that." I left the house that night and drove back to campus. Crying so hard I had to pull over twice. I was broke. I had to eat oatmeal for a month. I was terrified I wouldn't make rent, but I thought it was over. I thought that by paying him back, I had closed the ledger. I was naive. Grandma Evelyn was the only one who validated my reality. I called her the next day, sobbing. She listened quietly. "He moved the goalposts. Shiloh," she said. "He set you up to fail so he could forgive you. That's his power. He wanted you to beg. Repaying him ruined the script. You took away his leverage. So now he's going to hold on to the moral failing because he can't hold the financial one over you anymore." She paused. And then she said something that chilled me. "Accounts can be balanced, honey. Trust is harder. He's going to use this. Be careful." I didn't listen closely enough. I graduated 2 months later. I passed my exams. I had my degree, my certification, and a resume that sparkled. I believed that education was my exit door. I believed that the professional world was meritocratic, that if I was good enough, my father's opinion wouldn't matter. I started applying for jobs. I got interviews. I was confident. Then, the trap snapped shut. It was a week after graduation. My father called me. He didn't mention the credit card incident. He spoke as if we were best friends. He told me he had a position for me at Stonewick. He said he wanted me to come on as a junior bookkeeper. I felt a pit in my stomach. I asked about the salary. He named a figure that was 30% below market rate. He said I would be reporting to Austin, my brother, who knew less about accounting than I knew about deep-sea fishing. He said, "It's a chance to rebuild your reputation, Shiloh. After what happened with the card, well, you know, it's hard to trust someone with finances when they've shown poor judgment. But I'm willing to give you a second chance. Family supports family." I realized then what he was doing. He wasn't offering me a job. He was offering me a cage. He wanted me under his thumb, working for peanuts, reporting to my incompetent brother, forever the problem child who was being graciously rehabilitated by her saintly father. I declined. I told him I wanted to make my own way. I told him I had other interviews. His voice changed instantly. The warmth evaporated. "You're making a mistake, Shiloh," he said cold. "You think strangers are going to hire you? You think they won't call me? I'm Richard Patterson. Everyone calls me." "I have good references," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "My professors, the library supervisor." "Academic references," he scoffed. "People want to know who you are, not what you scored on a test. They'll call your family, and I'm not going to lie for you. Shiloh, I have my own reputation to protect. If they ask about your integrity, I have to tell them the truth." "The truth is I paid you back," I shouted. "The truth is you told me to use the card." "The truth," he said softly, "is what people believe, and they believe me." He hung up. I stared at the phone. I thought he was bluffing. I thought no father would actually torpedo his own daughter's livelihood just to prove a point. I was wrong. That was the moment the war began. That was the moment the theft stopped being a family dispute and became a weapon. He took that single, repaid transaction and turned it into a scarlet letter. He didn't just tell employers I made a mistake. He told them I was a thief. He told them I was untrustworthy, and because he was Richard Patterson, and I was nobody, they believed him. Now, sitting in the lobby of Crown Gate Financial, I think about that credit card statement. I think about the spreadsheet I made. I think about the oatmeal dinners. He thought that incident made me weak. He thought it made me unhireable. But he forgot one thing. In forcing me to pay him back, in forcing me to document every penny to defend myself, he made me the most meticulous record keeper in the state. He taught me that I couldn't rely on verbal agreements. He taught me to save the receipts. He created a forensic accountant who specializes in finding the truth buried in the numbers. He trained his own executioner. "Miss Patterson?" I look up. An assistant is standing there. She looks impeccable. "Mr. Thorne is ready for you now." I stand up. I smooth my skirt. I am walking into the office of a billionaire, carrying the weight of a crime I didn't commit. But I am also carrying the key my grandmother left me. The trap my father set is about to be sprung, but he is not the one holding the trigger anymore. I am. The rejection streak defied the laws of probability. In a town of this size, with my qualifications, the statistical likelihood of being rejected by 34 distinct employers in a row was virtually zero. Yet, that is exactly what happened. I applied to large corporations, regional banks, small family-owned tax firms, and even car dealerships looking for finance managers. The pattern was always the same: the initial enthusiasm, the phone screen that went perfectly, the in-person interview where I felt a genuine connection. And then the sudden, unexplained drop into silence. It was not just silence, it was a specific kind of ghosting. It was the kind where receptionists would suddenly become very busy when I walked in to follow up. It was the kind where emails bounced back or went unanswered for weeks. I began to feel like I was carrying a contagion that I could not see but everyone else could smell. The walls of the town felt like they were physically moving in closer, shrinking my world until I barely had enough room to breathe. I started aiming lower. I applied for data entry jobs. I applied for payroll clerk positions that required a high school diploma. I applied to be a bank teller. I was rejected from all of them. The breaking point came with a small manufacturing plant on the edge of the county. The human resources manager was a woman named Mrs. Higgins. She was older, with kind eyes and a desk cluttered with photos of her grandchildren. We had bonded during the interview over a shared love of gardening. She had practically hired me on the spot, telling me to come in on Monday for orientation. On Friday afternoon, she called me. Her voice was shaking. She told me that the position had been eliminated due to budget cuts. I knew it was a lie. I had seen their financials. I knew they were expanding. I pressed her. I begged her, not for the job, but for the truth. I asked her why she would hire me on Tuesday and fire me on Friday before I had even clocked in. There was a long pause on the line. Then, "Mrs. Higgins lowered her voice to a whisper, as if she were afraid her office walls were listening. She told me that she could not say this officially. She told me that if anyone asked, she would deny we ever spoke, but then she said the words that confirmed my nightmare. She told me that I needed to talk to my family. She said that a call had come in from a very prominent local businessman who felt obligated to warn them about my history of financial dishonesty. She said they could not take the risk. I hung up the phone and drove straight to my father's office. I did not make an appointment. I walked past the receptionist, a girl I had gone to high school with, who looked down at her keyboard as I passed, and I pushed open the heavy oak doors of Richard Patterson's sanctuary. He was on a call. He did not look surprised to see me. He simply held up a hand, finished his conversation about zoning permits, and placed the receiver down gently. He looked at me with that same calm, terrifying benevolence he used when he was explaining why he had to bulldoze a historic park for a strip mall. I asked him if he was enjoying it. I asked him if he felt powerful, starving his own daughter. He leaned back in his leather chair and tented his fingers. He did not deny it. He did not even try to gaslight me this time. He owned it. He told me that I was looking at this the wrong way. He said this was not punishment. It was discipline. He said that a parent's job is to correct the path of a wayward child, no matter how old they are. He said that I had shown a lack of loyalty and a lack of respect for the family structure. He said that until I learned that I was part of a whole, and not a rogue agent, I would find the world a very cold place. Then he laid out the bargain. It was a simple transaction, cold and hard as the granite on his desk. He told me to come home. He told me to give up my apartment and move back into my old bedroom. He told me to accept the job at the front desk of Stonewick, the one reporting to Austin. He told me to attend church with them every Sunday and sit in the family pew. He told me to apologize to him, publicly, for the stress I had caused. If I did those things, the rumors would stop. He would make a few calls. He would tell people that the matter had been resolved, that I was under his guidance now, and that I was safe to employ, as long as I remained under his roof. It was a total surrender of my autonomy. He wanted to own me. I looked at him, and for the first time, I did not see a father. I saw a businessman negotiating a hostile takeover. I was the distressed asset he was trying to acquire for pennies on the dollar. I told him to go to hell. He did not get angry. He just smiled. A sad, disappointed smile. He told me that was my choice. He said he would be here when I got hungry enough. The escalation began immediately. My refusal was seen as a declaration of war. My brother, Austin, took it as a license to hunt. Austin had always been a bully, but he was a lazy one. Now, he had a mandate. He turned my humiliation into a spectator sport. The town is small enough that you cannot avoid people. You see them at the gas station, at the grocery store, at the coffee shop. I walked into the local coffee spot one morning to buy a cheap black coffee. Austin was there with 3 of his friends, guys who work in sales or real estate, guys who wear pastel polo shirts and laugh too loud. When I walked in, the conversation stopped. Then Austin spoke up, loud enough for the barista and the 5 other customers to hear. He told his friends to check their wallets. He said you have to be careful when there is a sticky-fingered accountant in the room. His friends laughed. It was a cruel, braying sound. I stood there, freezing, my face burning. I walked to the counter, paid for my coffee with trembling hands, and turned to leave. Austin called out after me. He asked if I needed a loan. He said he could give me $10 if I promised not to embezzle it. That was the moment I realized the truth about reputations. The town did not need proof. They did not need to see a court docket or a police report. They only needed a confident storyteller. My father and brother were powerful, rich, and confident. I was struggling, pale, and defensive. In the court of public opinion, their confidence looked like truth, and my desperation looked like guilt. I stopped applying for accounting jobs. I stopped applying for office jobs. I needed to eat. I needed to pay rent on my studio apartment, which was the only sovereign territory I had left. I took the only job that did not check references because the turnover was so high they did not care. It was a night shift position at the Valley View Inn. It was a modest, rundown hotel off the interstate, the kind of place where truckers slept for 4 hours and families on tight budgets stopped because it was cheap. The owner was a man named Mr. Gorski who paid in cash and asked no questions. My job was a mix of everything. I checked guests in at 2 in the morning. I folded laundry. I scrubbed the lobby floors. And, because Mr. Gorski realized I was good with numbers, I did the inventory and basic bookkeeping for the attached diner and the supply closet. I worked from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. I earned $12 an hour. I was invisible. I was a creature of the dark, sleeping while the town lived and working while the town slept. It was exhausting, soul-crushing work, but it was money they could not touch. For 3 months, I existed in this shadow world. I thought I had found a bottom. I thought I had removed myself from their radar. I was wrong. They knew exactly where I was. One Tuesday evening, around 7:30, I was called in early to cover a shift for a waitress who had called in sick. The diner attached to the hotel is not a 5-star establishment, but it serves decent pot roast, and sometimes locals come in. I was wearing the uniform. It was a hideous polyester dress in a shade of mustard yellow that smelled permanently of fryer grease. I had an apron tied around my waist and a notepad in my hand. My hair was pulled back in a hairnet. The bell above the door chimed. I looked up, ready to greet a trucker or a tired tourist. It was my parents in Austin. They stood in the doorway of that cheap diner like royalty visiting a soup kitchen. My father was wearing a bespoke suit. My mother was in pearls and silk. Austin was grinning. They did not sit in the back. They sat at the center booth, the one directly under the brightest light. I froze. I wanted to run out the back door. I wanted to hide in the walk-in freezer, but I needed this job. I needed the $30 in tips I might make tonight. I walked over to their table. My legs felt like lead. My mother looked at me with tragic eyes. She reached out and touched my wrist, her fingers cool and dry. She said, "Oh, Shiloh, look at you." She did not say it with kindness. She said it with horror, as if I were covered in mud. My father ordered the roast beef. He did not look at me. He looked at the menu, speaking to me as if I were a stranger. He asked if the beef was fresh. He asked if the service was quick. Austin ordered a burger. He looked me up and down, taking in the hairnet, the mustard dress, the stain on my apron. He smiled. He asked me if this was the big career I had talked about. He asked if this was better than working for family. I took their orders. I walked to the kitchen. I stood over the sink and dry heaved for 30 seconds. Then I splashed cold water on my face, picked up the tray, and went back out. I served them. I refilled their iced teas. I brought them extra napkins. I endured an hour of their pity and their quiet, suffocating judgment. When they finished, my father paid the bill. He left a tip. He left a single $100 bill on the table. He caught my eye as he stood up. He pointed to the bill. He told me to keep the change. He said maybe I could use it to buy a new pair of shoes, because the ones I was wearing looked pathetic. They walked out, the bell chiming cheerfully behind them. I stood there, staring at the money. It was more than I made in 2 shifts. It was charity. It was an insult. It was a reminder that no matter how hard I worked, I was still just a girl in a polyester dress waiting for their scraps. I picked up the bill. My first instinct was to tear it up. My second instinct was to run after them and throw it in his face, but I did neither. Something snapped inside me that night. It was not a loud snap. It was quiet, like a lock clicking into place. I realized that begging the town to understand me was useless. I realized that trying to prove my innocence to people who enjoyed my guilt was a waste of energy. My father was not trying to teach me a lesson. He was trying to break my spirit. He wanted me to believe that I was nothing without him. I looked at the $100 bill. I folded it neatly and put it in my pocket. I would take his money. I would take every shift I could get. I would scrub the floors and fold the sheets and serve the pot roast, but I would not be a victim anymore. I went to the back office of the hotel that night. I had access to the computer to do the nightly audit. I finished my work in an hour. Then, instead of staring at the wall, I opened a new browser window. I started researching. I started looking for laws regarding defamation. I started looking for ways to track financial interference. I started looking for the cracks in my father's empire. I stopped crying that night. I stopped wishing things were different. I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. I looked at my reflection in the dark window of the hotel lobby. I looked tired. I looked worn down, but my eyes were dry. They wanted a thief? Fine. I would not steal their money. I would steal their peace. I would steal their secrets. I would steal back the life they took from me. The begging was over. The planning had begun. The shift from victim to strategist did not happen in a single explosion of cinematic glory. It happened in the quiet, dusty corners of my small apartment on a Tuesday afternoon. I was running on 4 hours of sleep after a double shift at the hotel, and I was doing something I had avoided for 2 years. I was going through the last box of things I had managed to take with me when I left my parents' house. For a long time, I could not bear to look at these items. They were artifacts from a life that felt like it belonged to a stranger, a girl who thought her biggest problem was an exam score. But now, with the cold resolve of my new plan settling in my chest, I needed to know exactly what I owned. I was looking for anything I could sell, anything I could use, anything that had value. The box was cardboard, softened by humidity and time. Inside, it was a chaotic jumble of college textbooks, old birthday cards, and trinkets. I sifted through a stack of accounting journals, setting them aside. I found a dried corsage from a dance I went to with a boy my father terrified into silence. And then, wedged at the bottom, beneath a heavy introductory law textbook, I found the phone. It was an old model, a prepaid burner phone with a cracked screen. I stared at it, frowning. Then I remembered. Grandma Evelyn had pressed it into my hand the Christmas before she died. We were in the kitchen, away from the prying eyes of my mother. She had told me to keep it charged and keep it hidden. She said it was for emergencies only, a direct line that my father did not pay for and could not monitor. I had been 22 and naive. I had thrown it in a box and forgotten about it, thinking Grandma was just being paranoid. I thought she was watching too many spy movies. I picked it up. It was dead. Of course. I rummaged through my drawer of tangled cables until I found a charger that fit. I plugged it in and waited. It took 10 minutes for the battery icon to flicker to life. When the screen finally lit up, the device vibrated violently in my hand. Once, twice, a dozen times. It was flooding with missed notifications. Most of them were spam, but there were voicemails. 7 of them. The dates were from 2 years ago, right around the time the blacklist began. Right around the time my life was falling apart. I pressed play on the first one. It was Grandma wishing me a happy birthday, her voice raspy and warm. I felt a lump in my throat, but I forced myself to listen. The second message was from a number I did not recognize. The voice was male, professional, and clipped. He identified himself as Arthur Sterling, an attorney with a firm in the state capital. He said he was calling regarding the estate of Evelyn Rowe. He said there were documents requiring my immediate attention and signature. He asked me to call back at my earliest convenience. I frowned. Grandma's will had been read weeks after the funeral. My father had handled everything. He had told us that Grandma left the bulk of her assets to the family trust, which he controlled, and that she had left me her jewelry collection, which my mother promptly put in a safe for safekeeping. I never saw a lawyer. I never signed anything. I played the next message. It was Mr. Sterling again. 3 days later. He sounded urgent. He asked if I had received the courier packet. The fourth message was the one that made my blood run cold. It was Mr. Sterling's assistant. Her voice was polite but final. She stated that per the instructions of my family representative, they were closing the file on the active transfer request as I had declined involvement. She said that if I changed my mind, I would need to file a motion to reopen. But for now, they would mark the beneficiary as unreachable and the assets would remain in the holding trust. I sat there on my floor, The phone pressed to my ear. The room spinning. Declined involvement? Beneficiary unreachable? I had been right here. I had been living in this town, desperate for work, checking my email every 5 minutes. I grabbed my own phone, my current one, and dialed the number from the voicemail. It was a long shot. It had been 2 years, but I had to know. A receptionist answered. I gave her my name. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. She paused. She asked me to hold. When she came back, her voice was cautious. She told me that the file was indeed archived. She said that their records showed that a Mr. Richard Patterson had contacted the firm on my behalf. I asked her what he said. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I was shaking. She read from the notes. She said that Mr. Patterson informed the senior partner that his daughter was undergoing a significant mental health crisis and was currently in a treatment facility with no access to legal matters. He had instructed them to hold all correspondence until further notice. A treatment facility. He had not just stolen my career, he had stolen my voice. He had told a law firm I was insane so he could intercept whatever Grandma had left me. I hung up the phone. I did not scream. I was past screaming. I felt a cold, sharp clarity that was almost like a high. If there was a lawyer, there were documents. If there were documents, there was something my father wanted to hide, but the lawyers had been stonewalled. I needed to find what Grandma had left for me on this side of the wall. I went back to the box. I dumped everything out onto the floor. I shook out the textbooks. I checked the pockets of an old coat. Nothing. Then I saw the cookbook. It was a thick, hardcover copy of a classic home cooking guide. The spine was broken, and the cover was stained. I almost laughed. Grandma Evelyn had never cooked a meal in her life if she could help it. She lived on takeout and black coffee. She used her oven to store sweaters. Why did I have her cookbook? I remembered the day she gave it to me. It was the same day she gave me the phone. She had handed it to me with a wink and said, Shiloh, every woman needs to know how to feed herself, but the best recipes are the ones you don't share. I picked up the book. It fell open naturally to the section on desserts. There, taped securely to the page for a recipe called Angel Food Cake, was a small, brass key. It was not a house key. It was flat, with a number stamped into the metal, 402. I peeled the tape off carefully. The key felt heavy in my palm. Underneath the key, written in Grandma's jagged, distinctive script, was a single line of text. First National Bank, downtown, ask for Sarah in the vault. Don't let your father carry your purse. I grabbed my coat. The First National Bank is the oldest bank in our town. It is a fortress of marble and brass, the kind of place that smells of old money. I walked in wearing my jeans and a sweatshirt. Ignoring the look the security guard gave me, I asked for Sarah. A woman in her 50s, wearing a severe gray suit, appeared from a back office. When I told her my name was Shiloh Patterson and I had key 402, her expression softened instantly. She did not ask for my ID. She looked at me and said, Evelyn said you would come eventually. She said it might take a while. She led me down the stairs into the vault. The air was cool and silent. She used her master key, and I used the brass key. The long metal box slid out with a smooth hiss. Sarah left me alone in a private viewing room. I sat at the wooden table and opened the lid. Inside, there was no jewelry. There were no stacks of cash. There was a thick manila envelope sealed with red wax. There was a leather-bound journal, and there was a legal packet with a cover letter from Crowngate Financial Holdings. I opened the legal packet first. My eyes scanned the pages. My brain struggling to process the legal jargon. It was a trust agreement, a dormant trust, established 15 years ago in my name, funded initially by the sale of Grandma's hardware business. But it wasn't just money. The assets had been invested. Specifically, they had been invested in a startup that had since become a giant. The name on the stock certificates was Crowngate. I didn't know the scope of it yet, but I knew the name. Crowngate was a titan, and according to this paper, I wasn't just a beneficiary of some small savings account. I held a protected, irrevocable stake in an entity that my father had no control over, But why hide it? Why the game? I opened the letter. My dearest Shiloh, it began. If you are reading this, two things have happened. First, your parents have done something unforgivable to corner you. Second, you have finally stopped trying to please them. I wiped a tear from my cheek. I could have just given you the money, the letter continued. But money given too early is just another thing for Richard to control. He would have coerced you into signing it over, or he would have guilted you into investing it in his failing projects. I had to wait until you were hungry. Shiloh, hunger clarifies things. She went on to explain that she had known about my father's business practices for a long time. She knew Stonewick was built on leverage and bullying. I have left you a sword, she wrote, but you have to be the one to swing it. I put the letter down and picked up the leather journal. It was old. The cover cracked. I opened it to the first page. It was a ledger. But not of numbers. It was a ledger of behavior. For years. Grandma Evelyn had been keeping a diary of the family dynamics. She had dates. She had quotes. June 12th, 2018. One entry read, Richard came over today, asked for a loan again, lied about the permit issues at the Riverside project. I told him no. He threatened to cut off my access to the grandkids. He is desperate. A desperate man is dangerous. October 4th, 2019. Catherine covered up Austin's DUI, paid the officer in cash. I saw the withdrawal slip in her purse when she left it on my counter. They are teaching that boy that consequences are for poor people. I flipped through the pages, my heart racing. It was all there, the history of their manipulation, the financial lies, the moral rot. She had seen it all. She had documented it all. She hadn't just left me an inheritance. She had left me a dossier. She knew they would gaslight me. She knew they would tell the world I was the crazy one, the thief, the liability. So she wrote down the truth in her own hand, dated and signed, a voice from the grave that they could not intimidate. I reached the end of the journal. Taped to the back cover was a business card. It was thick, expensive cardstock. The name on the card was Marcus Thorne, CEO, Crowngate Financial Holdings. On the back of the card, Grandma had written, He owes me a favor, a big one. When you are ready to burn it down, give him the envelope. I sat back in the chair, the silence of the bank vault pressing in on me. But I didn't feel small anymore. I felt heavy. I felt armed. My father thought he had buried me. He thought he had cut off my supply lines. He thought he was playing chess with a toddler. He didn't know that Grandma Evelyn had been playing a different game entirely. She hadn't just left me an exit route. She had left me the blueprints to the demolition. I put the papers back in the box, keeping the journal and the Crowngate packet in my bag. I walked out of the bank and into the bright, blinding sunlight of the afternoon. My phone buzzed in my pocket. My real phone. It was a text from the hotel manager, asking if I could work a double shift tonight because the laundry girl quit. I typed back, yes, I would work the shift. I would scrub the floors. I would smile at the guests. I would be the invisible, broken girl for just a little while longer. But I wasn't Shiloh the thief anymore. I was Shiloh the stakeholder. And I had a meeting to arrange. I thought I understood the game. I thought my father was simply a tyrant who demanded submission, a man who crushed me because I dared to walk away. I believed his motivation was ego. But 3 days after I found Grandma Evelyn's journal, I learned that ego was just the wrapper. The core was something far more desperate and far more transactional. It happened on a Wednesday. The hotel was hosting a midday luncheon for the local Chamber of Commerce as the invisible inventory girl. My job was to restock the bar in the private event room before the guests arrived. I was in the service corridor, a narrow hallway that ran behind the main banquet hall, separated only by a thin partition and a heavy velvet curtain. I heard the voices before I saw anyone. The numbers don't look good. Richard, the bank is getting nervous about the liquidity ratios. The voice belonged to Samuel Vance, a commercial lender and one of my father's oldest allies. I froze. My hand hovering over a crate of soda water, I pressed myself against the wall, holding my breath. Samuel, calm down. My father's voice was smooth, the practiced baritone of a man who sold confidence for a living. The Stonewick project is solid. We're just in a cash flow gap. It's temporary. It's been temporary for 6 months, Vance shot back, his tone sharp. You need a guarantor for the bridge loan, or you need to bring in a partner with clean books. Austin's credit is shot, and yours is leveraged to the hilt. I have a solution, my father said. I heard the clink of glass on a table. He was pouring a drink. I'm bringing Shiloh back into the fold. My heart hammered against my ribs. I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck. Shiloh? Vance sounded skeptical. The girl you told everyone was a thief? The one you said embezzled from you? That was necessary positioning, my father said, his voice dropping slightly but carrying clearly in the quiet hallway. She was getting too independent. I needed to cut her legs off so she couldn't run. But she's almost broken now. She's working at this dump for minimum wage. Another month, maybe 2, and she'll come crawling back. And then what? Vance asked. Then I hire her, my father said. I put her as the chief financial officer. She has a clean record, technically. She has the credentials. I control her. I control the books. We use her rehabilitation story to sell the banks on a new era of transparency. We leverage her signature to secure the new financing. She's the perfect frontman. She's smart enough to fix the books, but scared enough to do what I say. What if she refuses? She won't, my father laughed softly. She has no money. She has no career. I made sure of that. She's a solution. Samuel, a distressed asset that I'm about to acquire for free. I slid down the wall until I hit the floor. The crate of soda water dug into my back. It wasn't just punishment. It was a harvest. He hadn't blacklisted me because he was angry. He had blacklisted me to devalue me, to strip me of all options so that I would be forced to become the human shield for his failing company. He wanted to use my clean name, my hard-earned credentials, to underwrite his debt. He wanted to make me the fall guy for whatever financial mess he had created. I waited until their footsteps faded away before I moved. I walked out of the service corridor, went to the manager's office, and told him I was sick. I didn't care if he fired me. I had to get to a computer. I went straight to the public library. I didn't trust the Wi-Fi at my apartment anymore. I felt paranoid, exposed. I sat at a terminal in the back corner and started digging. I didn't look for jobs this time. I looked for Stonewick Development Group. Public records are a beautiful thing if you know how to read them. Most people see a construction company. I saw a corpse. Stonewick was bleeding. I found 3 mechanics' liens filed against their latest project in the last month alone, contractors who hadn't been paid. I found a court filing for a delayed payment on heavy machinery. I found tax assessments that were being contested. My father wasn't just overextended. He was drowning. The empire was a facade. The expensive cars, the charity galas, the perfect lawn. It was all being paid for with debt that was about to collapse, and he needed a fresh victim to pile that debt onto. Me. I was typing furiously, pulling up property records, when a thought hit me like a physical blow. Vance had mentioned Austin's credit was shot. My father's credit was leveraged. I logged into the credit reporting agency. My hands were trembling so hard I mistyped my password twice. I pulled my full credit report. I scanned the pages. Student loans, paid, credit card, paid off. Everything looked normal. And then I saw it. An inquiry. 6 months ago. A hard credit pull from a regional lending institution I had never banked with. And then, a month later, a new trade line opened, a $50,000 line of credit, in my name. The address listed on the account was my parents' house. I stared at the screen, the white light burning my eyes. I hadn't opened that account. I hadn't signed those papers. Someone had used my social security number. Someone had forged my signature. You're a thief, Shiloh. The irony was so sharp it tasted like blood in my mouth. My father had spent 2 years telling the town I was a criminal, all while he, or someone in that house, was committing actual identity fraud against me. They weren't just blocking my income. They were siphoning my creditworthiness to plug the holes in their sinking ship. They needed me to come back not just to work, but to legitimize the fraud. If I was the CFO, if I was back in the fold, then the line of credit could be explained away as a family business arrangement. If I stayed away, if I reported it, it was a felony. I closed the browser window. I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was the calm of a soldier who realizes the enemy is not just shooting at them, but is already inside the perimeter. I didn't scream. I didn't call my mother. I picked up the phone and called the credit bureau. I spoke to a fraud specialist. My voice was steady, professional. I told them I had discovered an unauthorized account. I placed a freeze on all 3 of my credit files. I requested the original application documents for the fraudulent loan be sent to my post office box, the one Grandma Evelyn had set up. Then I started a new document on my laptop. I named it The Evidence. I started typing. I listed every rejection. I listed the dates. I listed the names of the hiring managers. I wrote down the conversation with Mrs. Higgins. I wrote down the conversation I had just overheard in the hallway. I logged the details of the fraudulent loan. I wasn't just keeping a diary anymore. I was building a case file. Grandma Evelyn had said, "When they corner you, you'll have a door." But she also left me a weapon, and now I had the ammunition. I spent the next 2 days in a blur of cold efficiency. I continued to work my shifts at the hotel, keeping my head down, playing the part of the defeated daughter. But every spare moment was spent gathering proof. I knew I had to make one last move before I played the ace Grandma had left me. I had to be sure that I had exhausted every other option. I had to be sure that the system was truly rigged against me in this town, and I needed to get away from them physically. I felt unsafe. If my father knew I had frozen my credit, if the bank called him to say the line was flagged for fraud, I needed distance. I used the last of my savings to apply for 3 jobs. But not here, not in this county, not even in this state. I applied to firms in Seattle, in Boston, in Chicago, places where the name Richard Patterson meant nothing. I sat in my apartment, staring at the submit button. This was it. This was the last gasp of Shiloh Patterson, the independent applicant. If this didn't work, if his reach was truly that long, or if I was just too broken to be hired, then I would open the envelope. I hit send. 2 days later, my phone rang. It wasn't a rejection. It wasn't a local number. It was an area code I didn't recognize. "Ms. Patterson?" a woman's voice asked. "I'm calling from the executive office of Crowngate Financial Holdings." I froze. I hadn't applied to Crowngate. I hadn't applied to anything near them. "I think you have the wrong number," I stammered. "I didn't submit an application." "We know," the woman said. Her voice was kind but serious. "But our system flagged your name. Mr. Thorne would like to speak with you." "Mr. Thorne?" "The CEO," she said. "He's been waiting for you." My stomach dropped. Grandma's letter, the trust, the hidden shares. "Waiting for me?" I whispered. "Yes," she said. "He asked me to tell you that the door is open, but you have to walk through it." I looked at the packed bag in the corner of my room. I looked at the file on my computer titled The Evidence. My father wanted to use me as a solution? He wanted to drag me back into his web to save himself? He was about to find out that I wasn't a solution. I was a reckoning. "Tell him I'm coming," I said. The confirmation email arrived exactly 12 minutes after I hung up the phone. It was stark, professional, and terrifyingly precise. It did not look like a standard interview request generated by a piece of automated software. It looked like a summons. The subject line read, "Confidential, meeting with Marcus Thorne." I sat on the edge of my mattress, staring at the glowing screen of my laptop. The email contained a travel itinerary attached as a PDF file, a security clearance code, and a single instruction. "Present this code at the reception desk. Do not speak to anyone else." I read it 3 times. I checked the sender's domain name. I ran a search on the IP address headers. I was looking for the crack in the facade, the pixelated logo, or the misspelled word that would reveal this to be a cruel prank or a phishing scam. There was nothing. It was legitimate. Crowngate Financial Holdings, one of the most powerful investment firms on the East Coast, was flying me to their headquarters for a meeting with their chief executive officer. It made absolutely no sense. I was a night auditor at a roadside motel. I had a credit report that I had just frozen due to fraud. I was blacklisted in my hometown. CEOs of multi-billion-dollar conglomerates do not interview junior accountants. They do not even know junior accountants exist. I checked my bank account balance. I had $84.12. The email said my travel was prepaid, but I would need to get to the airport, which was 40 miles away. I would need food. I would need to not look like a fugitive who had been living on ramen noodles and anxiety for 2 years. I packed my bag with the kind of frantic precision that usually precedes a disaster. I packed my one good suit, the navy blue one I had worn to 34 failed interviews. I packed the white blouse I had ironed so many times the fabric was starting to shine, and, at the very bottom, wrapped in a t-shirt. I packed Grandma Evelyn's journal and the legal packet from the safe deposit box. I did not sleep that night. I laid in the dark, watching the shadows of headlights crawl across my ceiling, wondering if I was walking into a rescue boat or a shark tank. The next morning, as I was standing at the bus stop to catch the connector to the airport, my phone rang. The screen displayed Dad. I stared at it. I had not spoken to him since the day I confronted him in his office, the day he told me he was disciplining me. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but I answered. I needed to know. Going somewhere, Shiloh? His voice was smooth, devoid of anger, rich with that sickening paternal confidence. I felt the cold morning air bite through my thin coat. How do you know? I know everything that happens in my family, he said. I know you froze your credit file. A very dramatic move. By the way, it caused quite a headache for your brother. We had to shuffle some paperwork. He admitted it. He admitted the fraud as casually as if he were talking about moving a dinner reservation. I know you are trying to leave, he continued, his voice dropping an octave, becoming harder. And I know you have some foolish notion that you can go to the city and start over. But you need to understand something. My reach does not stop at the county line. I am not afraid of you anymore, I said, though my hand was shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. He laughed. It was a dry, dismissive sound. You are going to an interview, aren't you? Some firm thinks they want to hire you? Let me save you the trip. I have already made the call. Shiloh, one phone call is all it takes. I told them exactly who you are. I told them about the theft. I told them about your instability. By the time you walk through those doors, you will just be walking into another rejection. You will be finished before you even sit down. You don't even know where I'm going, I bluffed. I don't need to know the address to poison the well, he said. Come home. Stop this embarrassment. We have a desk waiting for you at Stonewick. It is the only desk you will ever sit at. I hung up. I turned off the phone. I pulled the SIM card out and dropped it into the trash can next to the bus stop bench. I got on the bus. I felt sick. Could he have found out? Could he have called Crowngate? It seemed impossible, yet his confidence was unshakable. He had destroyed every other opportunity I had ever had. Why would this be different? When I turned my phone back on after landing in the city, using only Wi-Fi, a text message came through from my brother. Austin. It must have been sent right before I pulled the card. Dad says good luck, LOL. The guy already knows you're a thief. Don't forget to steal a souvenir pen. I deleted the message. I swallowed the bile in my throat and walked toward the taxi stand. Crowngate Tower was not a building. It was a monument to capitalism. It rose out of the financial district like a shard of black glass, piercing the gray sky. It was 70 stories of intimidation. People in suits that cost more than my car rushed in and out of the revolving doors, speaking into headsets, looking important, looking busy. I stood on the sidewalk, clutching my worn leather bag. I felt small. I felt dirty. I felt like a fraud. My father's voice echoed in my head. One phone call, and you'll be finished. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was walking into an ambush. Maybe this Marcus Thorne just wanted to see the thief in person, to lecture me on morality before tossing me out on the street. I almost turned around. I almost walked back to the train station to go home and surrender. Then I touched the side of my bag, feeling the hard outline of Grandma's journal through the leather. When they corner you, you'll have a door. I squared my shoulders. I marched through the revolving doors. The lobby was vast, echoing with the click of heels on marble. The air smelled of ozone and expensive cologne. I approached the security desk. A man with a neck as thick as a tree trunk looked down at me. "Name?" he grunted. "Shiloh Patterson," I said. "I have a meeting with Mr. Thorne." I expected him to laugh. I expected him to check a list and tell me to get lost. I expected him to say, "We have no record of you." Instead, his eyes widened slightly. He typed something into his console. A light turned green. "Ms. Patterson," he said, his voice suddenly respectful. "You are cleared for the Penthouse Express elevators, Bank D, the far right." He handed me a badge. It did not say visitor, it said priority guest. I walked to the elevators. My heart was pounding so loud, I was sure the other people in the car could hear it. I was the only one who didn't get off at the trading floors or the legal departments. The elevator kept going up and up and up until my ears popped. The doors slid open on the top floor. It was silent up here. The carpet was thick enough to silence my footsteps. The walls were lined with modern art that looked aggressive and expensive. A woman was sitting at a sleek white desk in the center of the reception area. She looked like a model. Sharp features, hair pulled back in a severe bun. She was typing. She stopped the moment I stepped off the elevator. She stood up. "Ms. Patterson," she said. She didn't ask. She stated. She walked around the desk and extended a hand. "I am Elena. I am Mr. Thorne's executive assistant. Welcome to Crown Gate." I shook her hand. "Thank you. I know this is unusual. I wasn't sure if—" "May I take your coat?" she interrupted gently. "And your bag?" I tightened my grip on the strap. "I will keep the bag. Thank you." She nodded, understanding. "Of course. Mr. Thorne is waiting for you in his office." She led me down a long corridor. The walls here were glass, offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. I could see the river, the bridges, the endless sprawl of concrete and ambition. From this height, the people down below were invisible. "Can I ask you something?" I said, my voice sounding thin in the quiet air. Elena stopped and turned to me. "Certainly. Did anyone call here? About me? Today?" Elena's expression didn't change, but her eyes flickered with something I couldn't read. Amusement? Pity? "We receive thousands of calls a day. Ms. Patterson," she said. "My father," I pressed. "Richard Patterson. He said he called Mr. Thorne. He said he told him—" I couldn't finish the sentence. Elena tilted her head. "Mr. Thorne does not take unsolicited calls from regional developers. However, if your father did attempt to reach out, I can assure you that Marcus Thorne prefers to form his own opinions." She paused, her hand resting on the handle of a massive set of double doors. "And Ms. Patterson?" she added. "He has been expecting you for longer than you think." The words sent a chill down my spine. Longer than I think. What did that mean? Grandma died 4 years ago. The trust was 15 years old. How long had this man been watching? Elena opened the doors. "Go ahead," she said. I stepped inside. The office was cavernous. It was larger than my entire apartment. One wall was floor-to-ceiling glass. The furniture was dark wood and black leather, sparse and masculine. In the center of the room, behind a desk that looked like it was carved from a single block of obsidian, sat a man. Marcus Thorne stood up as I entered. He was younger than I expected, maybe in his early 40s. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him with architectural precision. He had dark hair, gray at the temples, and eyes that were intensely, unsettlingly focused. He didn't look like a banker. He looked like a predator who had decided to stop hunting because he had already caught everything worth catching. He didn't smile. He walked around the desk and stood in front of it, leaning back against the edge, crossing his arms. "Shiloh Patterson," he said. His voice was deep, resonant. "You look like her." I stopped in the middle of the room. "Like who?" "Evelyn," he said. My breath caught. "You knew her?" "I did," he said. "She was the first person to invest in me when I was 22 years old and had nothing but a crazy idea and a lot of debt." Everyone else laughed. Evelyn wrote a check. He gestured to a chair in front of him. "Please, sit." I didn't sit. I couldn't. My adrenaline was spiking. "Mr. Thorne, my father called you. He told me he did." "He did," Thorne said calmly. "About 2 hours ago. He was quite hysterical. He told my secretary that I was about to make a grave mistake. He called you a thief. He called you a liability. He threatened legal action if I employed you." I closed my eyes. It was true. The ambush had happened. "So why am I here?" I whispered. "If you know what he says, why did you let me in?" Thorne pushed himself off the desk and walked toward me. He stopped 3 feet away. The sheer force of his presence was overwhelming. "I let you in," he said, "because I don't care what Richard Patterson says. I care about what Evelyn Rowe wrote down." He turned and walked toward the wall on the right side of the room. There was a large abstract painting hanging there, a swirl of red and black. He reached out and pulled the edge of the frame. The painting swung outward on hidden hinges. Behind it, embedded in the wall, was a steel safe. It was digital, heavy, and imposing. "Your father thinks he ruined you," Thorne said, his back to me as he punched a code into the keypad. "He thinks he stripped you of your credentials. He thinks he took away your future." The safe beeped. A heavy mechanical thud echoed in the quiet room. Thorne pulled the heavy steel door open. "He is wrong," Thorne said. He reached inside and pulled out a single, thick envelope. It was identical to the legal packet I had found in the bank vault, sealed with the same red wax. He turned back to face me, holding the envelope out like a weapon. "He didn't take your future, Shiloh. He just kept you busy while your equity matured." He held the envelope toward me. "Open it." I stared at the envelope. I stared at the man who controlled billions of dollars, who had ignored my father's threats, who had been waiting for a girl from a small town to walk into his tower. I realized then that this wasn't a job interview. It never was. I stepped forward and took the envelope. My hands were steady now. The fear had evaporated, replaced by a cold, burning curiosity. "What is this?" I asked. "That," Thorne said, "is the rest of the story." The envelope weighed almost nothing. Yet as I took it from Marcus Thorne's hand, I felt my arm dip slightly, as if I were holding a bar of lead. The paper was heavy, cream-colored linen, the kind that costs $2 a sheet. The red wax seal on the back was stamped with a crest I recognized immediately, a simple, stylized owl. It was the logo of my grandmother's old hardware supply company, the one she had sold decades ago. "Sit down, Shiloh," Thorne said again, his voice softer this time. "You are going to want to be seated for this." I sank into the black leather chair, never taking my eyes off the wax seal. "You said you owed her," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "How?" "Grandma Evelyn sold pipe fittings and lumber. You run a global hedge fund." Thorne leaned against the edge of his massive desk. Crossing his ankles, he looked out the window at the gray skyline. 20 years ago, I was a kid with an algorithm and a bad credit score. I was trying to build a high-frequency trading platform. I went to every bank in the city. They all laughed at me. They saw a risk. Your grandmother saw a pattern. She was one of my first angel investors. She wrote me a check for $50,000. It was a lot of money back then. But she didn't just give me the cash. She gave me a condition. I looked up at him. "What condition?" "She told me that one day. She would need me to protect an investment of hers," Thorne said, turning his gaze back to me. "She didn't tell me what it was. She just said that when the time came, I would know, and I would need to act without hesitation. She made me sign a contract to that effect. She bet on me so that I would be here, in this chair, when you needed me, He nodded at the envelope in my hands. She gave me that packet 4 years ago, a week before she died. She told me to put it in my private safe and set a digital tripwire in my system. A tripwire? Your name, he said. Shiloh Patterson. She told me to input your name into our global human resources database. She said, one day, she will try to run. She will apply for a job somewhere far away. When she does, you bring her in. I felt a chill run through me. I didn't apply to Crown Gate. I applied to a logistics firm in Seattle and a data center in Boston, both of which are wholly owned subsidiaries of Crown Gate Holdings, Thorne said with a faint smile. The moment you hit submit on those applications 2 days ago, a red flag popped up on my private server. It bypassed HR. It came straight to me. That was the signal. It meant you were finally ready to leave them. I looked down at the envelope. My hands were trembling. Grandma Evelyn had turned the entire corporate world into a safety net for me, and I hadn't known. I had been starving, working for minimum wage, thinking I was alone, while a billionaire was waiting for a server ping. Open it, Thorne commanded gently. I slid my finger under the flap and cracked the wax. It snapped with a dry, sharp sound. I pulled out the contents. There were 3 documents. The first was a letter, handwritten on yellow legal pad paper. The second was a thick document titled, The Evelyn Rowe Irrevocable Grantor Trust. The third was a single sheet of heavy bond paper with intricate green borders and a gold foil stamp. I picked up the letter first. I knew that handwriting. It was jagged, rushed, and efficient. I could smell the faint scent of peppermint and old paper. My dear Shiloh, if you are reading this, it means you have finally stopped waiting for them to love you. I am sorry it took so long. I am sorry for the pain you had to feel to get here. You always wondered why I didn't stop them, why I didn't step in when Richard belittled you, or when your mother looked the other way. The truth is, I couldn't save your mother. She chose her cage a long time ago. She loves the security of Richard's control more than she loves the chaos of freedom. If I had intervened, if I had given you money while you were still under their roof, Richard would have taken it. He would have bullied you into signing it over, or he would have used it to manipulate you further. I had to wait until you were completely cornered. I had to wait until you had nothing left to lose, because that is when you are most dangerous. That is when you are most like me. You are not a victim. Shiloh, you are a mathematician. You are an auditor. You see the truth in numbers. So, look at the numbers I have left you. This is not a gift. This is ammunition. Do not use it to buy a house. Do not use it to go on vacation. Use it to balance the ledger. Love, Grandma. I wiped the tears from my face with the back of my hand. She was right. If she had given me this money 2 years ago, I would have used it to try to buy my father's approval. I would have paid off his debts. I would have done anything to make the family happy. I wasn't ready then. I was ready now. I picked up the third document, the certificate. I read the text, but my brain refused to process the zeros. I had to read it again. It was a stock certificate. It certified that the Evelyn Rowe Irrevocable Trust was the owner of 250,000 Class A preferred shares of Crown Gate Financial Holdings. I looked up at Thorne. I don't know what this means. What is this worth? Thorne walked over to his computer. He tapped a few keys. Crown Gate is a private company, Shiloh, but we have internal valuations for our equity partners, as of this morning's trading price. Those shares are valued at roughly $18 million. The room spun. I gripped the armrests of the chair to keep from falling off the earth. 18 million? And, Thorne continued, his voice sharpening, because they are Class A shares. They come with voting rights. You are not just a beneficiary. Through the trust, you are a minority stakeholder in this firm. You technically own a piece of the desk I'm sitting at. He let that sink in. Your grandmother set this up when you were 12, he explained. She moved the assets into a blind trust so your father could never touch them. Even if he sued you, even if he claimed guardianship, he cannot access this capital. It is bulletproof, and more importantly, it is invisible. Until this moment, nobody knew this trust existed except me, your grandmother, and the lawyers who drafted it. I looked at the certificate again. I wasn't just rich, I was powerful. I owned a piece of the entity that my father was terrified of. Now, Thorne said, his tone shifting from explanatory to strategic. Let's talk about this morning. He walked around the desk and sat down, folding his hands on the obsidian surface. Your father called me at 9 in the morning. He somehow found out you were traveling here. He was frantic. He spent 20 minutes trying to convince me that you were a pathological liar and a thief. He told me that you stole from his company. He told me you were mentally unstable. He warned me that hiring you would be a liability to my firm's reputation. I flinched, even knowing I was safe. The reach of his malice was terrifying. He does that, I said quietly. He calls everyone. Yes, Thorne said. But this time, he made a fatal error. Thorne leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. When he made those claims to the manager of a local grocery store, that was slander. When he made them to a local bank manager, that was tortious interference. But when he picked up the phone and lied to the CEO of Crowngate Financial about one of Crowngate's own shareholders? Thorne smiled, and it was a cold, wolfish thing. That is a breach of fiduciary duty. That is attempting to devalue the equity of a protected stakeholder, and since his company, Stonewick, currently has 3 active loan applications with our commercial lending division, well, he didn't just insult his daughter, he declared war on his creditor. My mouth fell open. Stonewick has loans with Crowngate? Indirectly, Thorne said. We bought the debt from a regional bank last month. We own his mortgage. Shiloh, we own his equipment loans. And this morning, he called his primary lender and tried to defraud us by lying about the character of one of our key investors. I started to laugh. It was a hysterical, bubbling sound that rose up from my chest. My father had called the one man in the world he needed to impress, and he had used that call to slander the one person who actually owned a piece of the bank. Ideally, he should have been begging me for mercy. Instead, he had handed me a loaded gun. He doesn't know, I said. He has no idea. No, he doesn't, Thorne agreed. And that is why you are here. He slid a folder across the desk. It wasn't the trust documents. It was a sleek black folder with the Crowngate logo. I am not offering you a job because I owe your grandmother, Thorne said sternly. I paid that debt by handing you the envelope. You can walk out of here with your $18 million and never work a day in your life. You can go to Paris. You can buy an island. He paused. But I read your file, Shiloh. I saw the forensic work you did on your own credit report. I saw the way you documented the fraud. You have a mind for the truth. You have an obsessive attention to detail that cannot be taught. You found the cracks in Stonewick's financials from a public library computer. I looked at the folder. I have a vacancy in my internal audit division. Thorne said, It is not a glamorous job. It involves hunting through terabytes of data looking for the one decimal point that doesn't belong. It is forensic accounting at the highest level. We hunt down embezzlement, money laundering, and corporate fraud. He leaned back. I need someone who knows what it feels like to be lied to. I need someone who knows that the numbers tell a story that people try to hide. You want me to work for you? I asked. I want you to work with me, he corrected. As a stakeholder, you have a vested interest in the purity of this company, but as an employee, you would have the authority to investigate irregularities. He tapped the folder. Starting with the Stonewick Development Group file. I stared at him. The pieces were clicking together with the precision of a Swiss watch. Grandma Evelyn hadn't just given me money. She had given me the high ground. And Thorne wasn't just offering me a job. He was offering me the gavel. My father wanted me to be the solution to his financial mess. He wanted to drag me back to sign fraudulent loans. I reached out and opened the black folder. Inside was an employment contract. The salary listed was $120,000 a year. It was fair. It was earned. I don't want the island, I said, my voice steady. I want the job. Thorne's smile widened. I thought you might, but, I added, looking up at him, I have conditions. My father thinks I am a thief. He thinks I am powerless. I don't want to just sue him. I want him to say it. Say what? I want him to admit what he did. Publicly. Thorne nodded slowly. There is a gala next week, the Regional Builders Association. Your father is the keynote speaker. He is planning to announce his new partnership to save his company. He thinks he is going to announce that you have returned to the family fold. He's delusional, I said. He is, Thorne agreed. I will be attending, as his primary creditor. I have a reserved table. I think it would be appropriate for me to introduce my new senior forensic analyst to the community. Don't you? I touched the cool paper of the stock certificate. I thought about the night shifts at the hotel. I thought about the mustard yellow uniform. I thought about Austin laughing at me in the coffee shop. Yes, I said. I think that would be very appropriate. Good, Thorne said. He picked up his phone. Then let's get you set up. You have a lot of reading to do. The Stonewick file is a mess. It looks like someone has been cooking the books for 5 years. I know, I said, pulling Grandma's journal out of my bag and placing it on the obsidian desk next to the millions of dollars I didn't know I had. I have the recipe right here. The view from the 71st floor of Crown Gate Tower was different at night. The city looked like a circuit board, a grid of electricity and movement that felt distant, manageable. I stood by the glass, holding a cup of lukewarm tea, watching the red tail lights of thousands of cars streaming out of the financial district. 2 days ago, I had been one of those invisible specks, worrying about bus fare. Now, I was standing in a room where the air conditioning smelled like filtered money. Marcus Thorne sat at the conference table behind me. We had been working for 6 hours straight. The surface of the mahogany table was covered in files. My files. The evidence folder I had compiled on the library computer had been printed out, dissected, and expanded by Crown Gate's legal team. The Regional Builders Association Gala is in 3 days, Thorne said. He did not look up from the document he was reviewing. It is the biggest event of the year for your father. He is the keynote speaker. He plans to announce his revitalization strategy for Stonewick. He plans to tell the room that he has secured a new, mysterious financing partner to save the company. I turned away from the window. He thinks the partner is you. He does, Thorne said. He believes my silence regarding his slanderous phone call was a tacit agreement. He thinks I accepted his warning about you and decided to do business with him anyway. He is arrogant enough to believe that money overrides character. Thorne closed the file and looked at me. I want you to be there, Shiloh. I want to introduce you to the room, not as his daughter, as my senior forensic analyst and a primary shareholder of Crown Gate Financial. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. The adrenaline of the vault and the job offer had faded, leaving behind the jagged reality of what we were about to do. I had spent 2 years running from my father, trying to make myself small so he couldn't hit me. Now, Thorne was asking me to walk into the spotlight and hand him a loaded gun. I don't know, Marcus, I said, using his first name as he had insisted. I want justice. I want my life back. But I don't want a spectacle. If we do this publicly, if we humiliate him in front of the entire town, doesn't that make me just like him? He uses shame as a weapon. If I use it back, am I any better? It was the question that had been haunting me. I wanted to be free, not cruel. I wanted to balance the ledger, not burn the library. Thorne stood up and walked over to me. He stood next to me at the window, looking out at the city he had conquered. Shiloh, he said quietly, you are confusing cruelty with consequences. Cruelty is hurting someone because you enjoy it. It is lying about a young girl to destroy her career because she wouldn't obey you. That is cruelty. He turned to face me. Truth is not cruelty. Truth is just light. If your father built his house in the dark, he cannot blame you when the sun comes up. You are not going there to scream at him. You are not going there to mock him. You are going there to exist. You are going there to stand in your own power. If the sight of you standing tall destroys him, that is his fault, not yours. Silence is what kept you trapped. Silence is the mortar he used to build those walls around you. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass. I didn't see the frightened girl in the polyester waitress uniform anymore. I saw a woman who knew the math. "Okay," I whispered. "I'll do it." The next 48 hours were a blur of legal precision. I was introduced to Crown Gate's general counsel, a woman named Diana holding a gaze that could peel paint off a wall. She treated my case not as a family dispute, but as a corporate asset recovery mission. We sat in the war room, organizing the timeline. We treated it like a forensic audit. "Exhibit A," Diana said, sliding a paper across the table. "The original credit card statement from 4 years ago. We have the transaction logs. We have the syllabus from the CPA exam board, matching the dates and amounts. We have the bank transfer showing you repaid the full amount to Richard Patterson's personal account." "Exhibit B," she continued. "The log of rejection letters, 34 of them. We have cross-referenced these with phone records from Stonewick Development, on the days you were rejected. Calls were placed from your father's direct line to the hiring managers of 28 of those firms. The correlation is statistically undeniable. It is tortious interference with business relations, multiplied by 24 counts. Exhibit C, I said, pushing the credit report forward. The fraud, Diana nodded grimly. We have the original application from the lender. We subpoenaed it yesterday. The signature is a forgery, but a lazy one, and the IP address used to submit the application traces back to the residential Wi-Fi at your parents' address. It was submitted at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. We checked the device ID. It matches an iPad registered to Austin Patterson. I closed my eyes. Austin. My brother had stolen my identity to fund his lifestyle while mocking me for being poor. It wasn't surprising, but it still stung. This is a felony, Diana said. Identity theft, wire fraud, bank fraud. We have enough here to put your brother in federal prison for 5 years. We have enough to strip your father of his licenses. We aren't filing charges yet, Thorne interjected from the head of the table. Not until after the gala. We want them to feel safe until the very last second. There is one more thing, I said. I hesitated, then pulled a crumpled piece of paper from my notebook. We need a witness. Paperwork is great, but people connect with people. We need someone who heard him say it. We have the call to Marcus, Diana noted. That's corporate, I said. We need someone local, someone from the town. I told them about Mrs. Higgins. She was the HR manager at the manufacturing plant, the one who had hired me and then fired me 3 days later with tears in her eyes. She was the only one who had shown me a flicker of kindness, the only one who had hinted that my family was behind the blacklisting. She retired last month, I said. I saw it in the local paper. She doesn't have to worry about her job anymore. She doesn't have to worry about my father's influence. Thorne nodded at me. Call her. I stepped out into the hallway and dialed the number I had found in the online directory. My heart was hammering. If she refused, if she hung up, we still had the case, but we lost the heart of it. Hello? An older woman's voice answered. Mrs. Higgins? I said. This is Shiloh Patterson. There was a long silence on the line. I held my breath. Shiloh, she said softly. I wondered if you would ever call. I found a job. Mrs. Higgins, I said. A real one. I'm an auditor now. I'm building a case. I know, she said. Small towns talk. I heard you left. I was happy for you. I need your help, I said. I need you to say on the record what you told me that day in the office. I need you to confirm that my father called you. She paused again. I could hear the sound of a television in the background, a game show. It sounded so normal, so peaceful. He threatened the plant owner, Mrs. Higgins said, her voice suddenly crisp. He told us that if we hired you, he would pull his construction contracts for the new warehouse expansion. He didn't just badmouth you. Shiloh, he blackmailed the company. My grip on the phone tightened. It was worse than I thought. Will you testify? I asked. If I send a lawyer to you? I'm 70 years old, honey, Mrs. Higgins said. I don't have a boss anymore. And I never liked bullies. Is that a yes? Send the lawyer, she said. I kept the notes from that call. I wrote down everything he said because it made me so sick. You can have them. I walked back into the war room. I looked at Thorne and Diana. We have her, I said. And she has notes. Thorne smiled. It was the smile of a general who had just secured the high ground. Excellent. The next day, the RSVP arrived. It came via email to Thorne's executive assistant. It was from Richard Patterson. Mr. Thorne, I am delighted that you will be attending the RBA Gala. It will be an honor to host you at the head table. I look forward to finalizing the details of our new partnership. I trust my previous warning regarding the family matter has been taken to heart. You will find that Stonewick is a partner of the highest integrity. Sincerely, Richard. He had invited himself to sit next to the man who held his mortgage, believing he had successfully neutralized his own daughter. He was walking into a room where he thought he was the apex predator, completely unaware that he was actually the prey. He wants integrity, Thorne said. Reading the email off the screen, we will give him integrity. The preparation for the night of the gala was not just legal, it was psychological. Thorne insisted that I needed to look the part. No more hiding, he said. He sent a stylist to my hotel room. I stood in front of the mirror as she zipped up the dress. It was not a ball gown. It was a sheath of midnight blue silk. Tailored to within an inch of its life, it was sharp, professional, and expensive. It was the color of a bruise that had healed. I put on the heels. I put on the diamond studs that were part of the trust assets, Grandma Evelyn's diamonds. I pulled my hair back into a sleek, low knot. I looked at myself. I didn't look like the girl who scrubbed floors at the Valley View Inn. I didn't look like the girl who pleaded with her father in his study. I looked like a woman who owned $18 million of Crown Gate Financial. I looked like a woman who could audit a balance sheet and find the bones buried underneath. Thorne picked me up in the limousine. He wore a tuxedo. Looking every inch the billionaire titan, he handed me a glass of water. How are you feeling? He asked as the car pulled away from the curb, heading toward the highway that would take us back to my hometown. I'm terrified, I admitted. Good, he said. Fear keeps you sharp. Just remember the plan. No drama. Just facts. You don't say a word until I introduce you. You let him dig the hole. You let him fill the room with his lies. And then, you just stand up. We drove in silence for the hour it took to reach the venue. It was held at the Grand Hotel, the fancy historic property downtown, miles away from the roadside motel where I had worked. As we pulled into the circular driveway, I saw the valet stand. I saw the photographers. I saw my father's car, a black Mercedes, parked right in front, in the VIP spot. My stomach flipped. Breathe, Thorne said. He opened the folder on his lap. We have the defamation notice ready to be served. We have the forensic report on the identity theft ready to be handed to the district attorney on Monday. Tonight is just the courtesy call. Tonight is just letting him know that the game is over. The car stopped. The driver opened the door. I stepped out onto the red carpet. The air was cool. Flashbulbs went off, capturing Thorne. Then the cameras turned to me. I saw the confusion in the photographer's eyes. They didn't recognize me at first. I was out of context. I wasn't the waitress. I wasn't the daughter in the background. Then, I heard a whisper ripple through the crowd near the entrance. Is that the Patterson girl? No, it can't be. She works at the motel. My God, look at the diamonds. I kept my chin up. I placed my hand lightly on Thorne's arm. We walked toward the double doors. Inside that ballroom were 200 of the most influential people in my town. The bankers who had rejected me, the business owners who had ignored my applications, the neighbors who had whispered about me in the grocery store, and at the front of the room, standing under the crystal chandelier, holding a glass of champagne, was my father. He was laughing. his hand resting on my brother's shoulder. They looked victorious. They looked safe. They had no idea that the floor was about to drop out from under them. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of expensive perfume and impending justice. "Ready?" Thorne whispered. "Ready," I said. We walked in. The Grand Hotel ballroom was a sea of crystal and black ties. From my vantage point in the private alcove to the left of the stage, I could see everything. I saw the waiters moving with practiced invisibility, carrying trays of champagne. I saw the mayor shaking hands with the president of the bank that had rejected my application 3 times. The room smelled of expensive perfume and roasted duck. A scent that I knew was supposed to signify celebration, but tonight, it smelled like a trap waiting to be sprung. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that contradicted the stillness of my posture. I stood with my hands clasped loosely in front of me, smoothing the silk of the midnight blue dress Marcus Thorne had purchased for me. I was not the girl in the polyester uniform anymore. I was an executioner in couture. At 7:15, the doors opened, and the guests of honor arrived. My parents entered with the kind of entitlement that takes generations to cultivate. My father, Richard, wore his tuxedo like armor, his chest puffed out, his smile wide and predatory. He moved through the crowd not like a guest, but like a landlord inspecting his property. My mother, Catherine, drifted beside him, a pale satellite in chiffon, nodding and smiling at exactly the right intervals. Trailing behind them was Austin. My brother looked bored. He checked his phone. He adjusted his cufflinks. He scanned the room, likely looking for a waitress to harass or appear to impress. He looked so safe. He looked like a man who believed consequences were things that happened to other people. I watched them work the room. My father was in his element. He cornered Samuel Vance, the lender I had overheard him speaking to days ago. I could see my father gesturing expansively, likely spinning the tale of his fictional new partnership, the influx of capital that was going to save Stonewick Development Group from the ruin I knew was lurking in its ledgers. I watched as my father moved to a group of 3 men standing near the stage. One of them was the CEO of a large regional logistics firm, one of the companies that had inexplicably rescinded a job offer to me last year. My father clapped the man on the shoulder, even from 20 feet away. The acoustics of the ballroom carried his booming voice. "It is a shame about Shiloh," my father said, shaking his head with performative sadness. "We tried to get her help, but you know how it is. Once a thief, always a thief. We just could not risk her having access to the accounts. It breaks a father's heart to say it, but she is a liability." The men nodded sympathetically. They drank his poison and called it wine. I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Marcus Thorne standing beside me. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were burning with a cold, blue fire. "Did you hear that?" he asked softly. "I heard it," I said. "Good," Thorne said. "Remember that sound. Remember the lie, because it is the last time he will ever get to tell it." The lights dimmed. The conversation in the room died down to a respectful murmur. Marcus Thorne walked out onto the stage. The applause was thunderous. In this room, Thorne was not just a guest. He was a god. He controlled the capital that kept half the businesses in this room alive. He stood at the podium, waiting for the silence to be absolute. "Thank you." His voice resonated through the speakers, deep and commanding. "Tonight, we celebrate the future of industry in this region. We celebrate growth. We celebrate integrity." He paused on the word integrity. He let it hang in the air for a second too long. "I am often asked what makes Crown Gate Financial successful," Thorne continued. "People think it is algorithms. People think it is ruthless aggression. But the truth is, Crown Gate was built on a single bet made 20 years ago. A bet made by a woman who saw value where others saw risk. Her name was Evelyn Rowe." I saw my father freeze. He was standing at the front table, a glass of wine halfway to his mouth. At the mention of his mother's name, his smile faltered. "Evelyn Rowe taught me that the numbers tell a story," Thorne said. She taught me that you cannot build a skyscraper on a cracked foundation, and she taught me that legacy is not what you leave behind in your bank account, but who you leave behind to guard it. Thorne looked directly at my father. Then, he looked at the curtain where I was standing. "It is my distinct honor," Thorne announced, his voice ringing with authority, "to introduce the newest member of the Crowngate executive team. Please welcome our senior forensic analyst and a primary shareholder of Crowngate Financial Holdings, Ms. Shiloh Patterson." The silence that followed was not respectful. It was the silence of a vacuum, as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. I stepped out from behind the curtain. I walked to the center of the stage. The spotlights hit me, blindingly bright, but I did not blink. I looked out into the darkness, finding the pale, shocked faces at the front table. My mother dropped her clutch. It hit the floor with a dull thud. Austin's mouth was hanging open, his boredom evaporated, replaced by a dawn of sheer terror. And my father, Richard Patterson, went purple. The veins in his neck bulged. For a moment, his brain simply could not process the image. The daughter he had banished to the night shift, the daughter he had starved and slandered, was standing on the stage next to the most powerful man in the state, wearing diamonds that belonged to his mother. He stood up, his chair scraped violently against the floor. "What is this?" he shouted. His voice was not smooth anymore. It was a jagged bark of rage. "This is a joke, Marcus. This is a mistake." Thorne did not move. He stood next to me, a pillar of calm. "There is no mistake, Richard. She is a thief," my father screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She is a liar. You cannot have her up there. Security! Get her off the stage. She is mentally unstable." The crowd gasped. People were whispering, shifting in their seats. My father was losing control. He was destroying the carefully curated image of the benevolent patriarch in real time. "She embezzled from my company," my father yelled, stepping toward the stage. "She is banned from my home. I made sure she was finished in this town. I made sure no one would hire her." The room went dead silent. He had said it. In his rage, in his desperate need to assert dominance, he had admitted the interference. Thorne leaned into the microphone. His voice was low, deadly, and amplified to every corner of the room. "You made sure no one would hire her?" Thorne repeated. My father froze. He realized, too late, what he had just confessed. He looked around the room, seeing the shock on the faces of the business leaders he had lied to. I was protecting them," he stammered, his voice losing its power. "She stole—" "Let us clarify that record," Thorne said. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. "The theft you refer to was a sum of $3,450 in authorized professional education expenses, expenses which she repaid to you, in full, from her own savings, 4 years ago. We have the bank records." Thorne picked up a document from the podium. "As for your interference," Thorne continued, "we have witness statements from 3 human resources directors confirming that you personally called them to threaten their business interests if they employed your daughter. That is not protection. Richard, that is tortious interference." Thorne turned to look at me. He gestured for me to speak. I stepped up to the microphone. My hands gripped the sides of the podium. I looked down at my father. He looked small now. He looked deflated, like a balloon with a slow leak. "I am not a thief," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice of the girl Grandma Evelyn knew I could be. "I am an auditor, and I am a shareholder." I looked at Austin. "And I am also the victim of identity fraud." I said clearly, "A line of credit for $50,000 was opened in my name 6 months ago. The application was submitted from your home, using a forged signature." Austin went white. He sank into his chair, trying to make himself invisible. Thorne signaled to the side of the stage. Our general counsel, Diana, walked down the stairs. She was carrying a thick manila envelope. She walked straight to my father's table. "Mr. Patterson," Thorne said, You just attempted to slander a major stakeholder of Crowngate Financial in a public forum. You also confessed to blacklisting her. My legal counsel is serving you with a formal notice of suit for defamation, malicious interference, and breach of fiduciary duty regarding your loans with our firm." Diana dropped the envelope on the table in front of my father. It landed with a heavy slap that echoed like a gunshot. "As of this moment," Thorne said, "Crowngate is calling in your debt. We are accelerating the repayment schedule on all Stonewick loans due to violation of the character clauses in your contract. You have 30 days to pay in full." My father collapsed into his chair. He looked at the envelope. He looked at the crowd. He looked at me. "Shiloh," he whispered. It was a plea. "Shiloh, please, we are family." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had watched me serve him a burger in a hairnet and laughed. I looked at the man who had turned my childhood into a performance and my adulthood into a prison. I leaned into the microphone for the last time. "I did not come here to destroy you, Dad," I said. "I came here to end the lie. I came here to take back my name." I paused, looking at my mother, who was weeping silently into her napkin. "You told me that independence was disrespect," I said. "You told me that money was a leash. You were wrong. Grandma Evelyn taught me that the people who love you give you options, not cages." I stepped back from the podium. I did not wait for his response. I did not wait for the applause, though it started, slow and hesitant at first, then growing louder as the shock wore off and the room chose the winner. I turned and walked off the stage. I walked past the stunned waiters. I walked out of the ballroom doors and into the cool, quiet lobby. I didn't look back. The aftermath was swift and brutal, exactly as the numbers predicted. Stonewick Development Group filed for bankruptcy protection 2 weeks later. The revelation of the fraud, combined with Crowngate calling in the loans, caused a liquidity crisis my father could not talk his way out of. The community turned on him. In a small town, power is everything, and once the illusion of his power was shattered, the respect evaporated like mist. Austin was indicted on federal fraud charges 3 months later. The evidence was irrefutable. My parents had to sell the house on the hill to pay for his legal defense. I did not stay to watch it burn. I didn't need to. I moved to the city. I started my job at Crowngate. I worked 60 hours a week, not because I had to, but because I loved the hunt. I loved finding the truth buried in the spreadsheets. I loved knowing that my work protected people from bullies like my father. 6 months after the gala, I drove back to my hometown for one afternoon. I didn't visit my parents. I drove straight to the old cemetery on the edge of town. I walked through the grass until I found the granite marker. Evelyn Rowe. I knelt down. The ground was cold. I placed a copy of my first business card on the stone. Shiloh Patterson, Senior Analyst. I opened the door. "Grandma," I whispered, and I burned down the cage. The wind rustled the trees, sounding like a dry, raspy laugh. I stood up, brushed the dirt from my knees, and walked back to my car. I had a meeting in the morning. I had a life to live. And for the first time in 28 years, it was entirely, wonderfully mine. Thank you so much for listening to Shiloh's story. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Don't forget to subscribe to the Emma Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so we can keep bringing you more stories of truth, payback, and freedom. See you in the next one.